Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I'm especially delighted since you have effectively decided today on my replacement with a very strong endorsement of 15 votes. My own endorsement in the committee here was more or less the same, plus or minus 8. The topic I have today is very important. It is on the working of a key element of the banking union. The banking union is a system. It's a system that works at the level of legislation here in the Parliament and elsewhere, of regulation, and then of implementation. We are speaking about a piece of the implementation. Under the banking union, for major banks, ongoing supervision is the role of the ECB. We published a report on this last year. Where banks seem to have potential for getting into difficulty, there needs to be heightened preparation and intervention, and that also is the role of the ECB. And we will publish a report on this next week and present it here hopefully this month. When a bank gets into difficulties and is assessed as failing or likely to fail, then the resolution authorities step in this case the Single Resolution Board. That's the subject of this audit. All of this is subject to regulation by the EBA, which will be the subject of an audit of a future report. So you will see, I hope, that we are trying to give you here in the Parliament a full picture of the operation, fullish picture of the operation of key elements of the banking union. This element, the SRB, is based in Brussels and was set up in 2015. The job of the SRB is to take actions to allow for the orderly restructuring of a bank when necessary. I'll just try the remote control. To prepare for such an event, the SRB is responsible for contingency planning for the resolution of each bank within its remit. Our key findings. This is not a system without problems. There are real problems that need to be addressed at a systemic level. The SRB faced challenges from the outset in recruiting staff with the appropriate mix of skills. Delays in staffing impacted all aspects of its work, not least its resolution planning. The SRB's formal resolution plans have shortcomings in a number of respects. It has not yet completed resolution plans for the banks within its remit. Although preliminary versions of resolution plans are in place for most banks, they do not meet the legislative standard known as the Single Rule Book. Key information on the key business models of banks is missing in these resolution plans, as was information on relationships with subsidiaries and other group structures. Even when taking into account more informal planning documents, background information, the full legislative standard could not be met with the information available. The SRB has not determined what are known as substantive impediments for the banks under its remit. In other words, even in respect to the plans it has not determined what are the big obstacles to these plans that must be overcome. These are issues that relate to the structure of the bank that could impede its speedy resolution. So that's important that they grasp this topic. The SRB has also not set requirements yet for what is known as MREL, the minimum amount of own funds and eligible liabilities that should be available for write-down in the event of a resolution. This is the buffer within the bank's own balance sheet that is available to prevent against the public having to bear the costs of a bank resolution. So very important. The SRB is part of a system. It works with national authorities and with the ECB. Some improvement in information sharing between the SRB and the ECB is needed. This is to facilitate communication in the event of a bank being in difficulty, but also in advance of the potential for a bank getting into difficulty. Greater clarity is also needed in the roles and responsibilities in the framework of cooperation with the national resolution authorities. And this mirrors our finding last year in relation to the ECB, where there is also a need for a greater involvement of the national authorities. We also identified some potential shortcomings in the current legal framework for resolution as well, including the fact that the SRB cannot impose a moratorium on bank withdrawals during a resolution. The report points out that the set-up of the SRB from scratch in a very short time frame posed a very significant challenge. Maybe the requirements of the legislation were so onerous that it was almost an impossible challenge. And the identified weaknesses must be seen in this startup context, but they are weaknesses. The SRB needs to accelerate its recruitment efforts, these are the recommendations, and resource its HR function appropriately to cope with the demands of recruitment, particularly for more specialised and more senior posts. We recommend that the SRB further develops its own internal guidance for what should be in resolution plans. The SRB should also determine a date for the completion of fully compliant resolution plans for each bank under its remit, but it should do so using a prioritised approach, the riskier first. We recommend that formal information sharing between the ECB and the SRB should be improved, and greater clarity is needed in the framework for cooperation with the national resolution authorities. The SRB should request their legislator for the power to impose a moratorium in the event of a bank resolution. This, of course, is a matter for the legislator, but it ought to be considered. Thank you.